Hello everyone. If you're new here, hit like and subscribe and drop a comment with where you're from. It helps other people find these stories. Tonight, 7 true horror stories from 7 corners of New York City. A subway stalker who knew too much. A neighbor who wouldn't stay on his side of the wall. An empty apartment above that wasn't empty. Workplace harassment that everyone shrugged off. A relationship that slowly became a cage. A bar regular who waited for closing time. A door-to-door surveyor who asked the wrong question. Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Harlem, the Lower East Side, Staten Island. Every borough, every kind of danger. Let's get into it. He knew my train. He knew my stop. By the time I understood that, he knew where I lived. 5th floor walk-up, Upper East Side, a block from Lexington. 3 years in the city, paralegal at a firm on Park Avenue. Same routine every day. 6 train from 86th around 7:30. Same spot by the doors, easy exit when we hit 51st, room to breathe. The screech of the rails, the morning crush of coats and briefcases, the smell of coffee and stale air. 70 blocks of tunnels and stops. Lexington and 59th. 51st. Grand Central. The same faces at the same times. You start to feel like you know the city's rhythm. Like you know when you're safe. Past the bodega on the corner, the dry cleaner with the faded awning, the corner where the same homeless man slept. I knew the faces, knew the rhythm, knew when I was safe, until I didn't. October. Same guy, same car, standing a few feet away. Navy jacket, dark jeans, backpack. He never looked directly, but when I got off at 51st, he got off. When I walked to my building, he'd pause at the corner like he was checking his phone. Paranoid, maybe. Half of Midtown takes the 6. Lawyers, paralegals, assistants, we all have patterns. But the feeling didn't go away. Photo. No, confront him. No, wait and see. It happened again. Closer than necessary when the car was packed. Same door as me when there were emptier ones. Once I caught him in the train window watching my reflection. I looked away. He did too. He'd been watching. Then the weekend. Trader Joe's on 72nd, a store I'd never seen him in before. I'd gone there because it was close to a friend's apartment. We'd had coffee. She'd left. I'd stopped to grab groceries. And there he was at the end of the freezer aisle. Same navy jacket. Same way of holding himself. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. He smiled, like he was glad to see me. I left my cart and walked out. My hands were shaking. How had he known I'd be there? I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't told anyone except my friend. Had he followed me from her building? I'd taken the train to 14th Street. I'd walked. Had he been behind me the whole time? I called my friend. I said I thought someone was following me. She said to come back to her place. I said I was going home. I needed to feel safe. I didn't. That night, I changed my route. Took the 4 train instead. Got on at 59th. Different line. different station. The 4 runs express through Manhattan, fewer stops, different crowd. I thought it would throw him off. He was there, 3 cars down, but I saw him through the window when we pulled into the station. Same navy jacket, same posture. He'd known where I'd switch. How? I hadn't told anyone. I'd made the decision on the platform. I started documenting everything, photos when I could get them without being obvious, notes on my phone with times and locations. The 6 from 86th, 7:32 a.m. The 4 from 59th, 7:45 a.m. Trader Joe's, Saturday 2 p.m. Hell's Kitchen Restaurant, Thursday 8 p.m. The pattern was clear. I wasn't imagining it. 19th Precinct. The officer was polite but tired. Unless he made a direct threat or touched me, nothing they could do. Vary my routine. I wanted to scream. I had. He'd been there anyway. My roommate, we'd met through a Facebook housing group, started walking me to the train when our schedules aligned. It helped, but I kept seeing him. Outside my coffee shop on 2nd Avenue, in the lobby of my gym on 72nd, at a restaurant in Hell's Kitchen where I was meeting a date, he was at the bar. Watching, I canceled, stopped dating for a while, stopped posting, stopped sharing my location. New York shrank to work, home, and a few safe routes. Restraining order. The officer said I'd need evidence of a threat or physical contact. I had photos, notes, a feeling that wouldn't quit. Moving. Lease just renewed. Couldn't afford to break it. Tell my boss. I didn't want to be the woman who couldn't handle the city. So I kept documenting, kept hoping. Hundreds of women rode the 6 every day. Nothing happened to them. Right. Then the lobby door creaked behind me. I'd taken an Uber to avoid the train, dropped a block away, keys in hand, head on a swivel. I'd done everything right, and he was there, waiting. He'd known where I lived. He'd known everything. Changing routes hadn't helped. Ubers hadn't helped. Not posting hadn't helped. He'd found me anyway. What I didn't know was that he wasn't just following me. He'd already found where I lived. The next week, I tried everything. 4 train from 59th. 5 train from 86th. Got off at Grand Central sometimes. Walked the extra blocks. Different stops. Different routes. He was there. Not every time, but enough. Enough that I stopped believing in coincidence. Baseball cap. Stopped wearing the coat I'd had on the first day. Changed my hair, cut it short. It didn't matter. He always found me. Had he memorized my schedule? Known my building, my apartment number? I started checking my mailbox, checking the buzzers. Delivery drivers, pharmacy, dry cleaner, voter registration, gym forms, work forms. How many places had my name and address? He'd found me. 2 weeks later, I came home late from a friend's place in the West Village. I'd taken an Uber to throw him off, or so I thought. I'd stopped taking the train at night. I'd stopped walking alone after dark. The driver dropped me a block from my building, Lexington and 86th. The street was quiet for a Friday. I texted my roommate to say I was almost home. She'd said she'd leave the lobby light on. She wasn't there that night. She'd gone to her boyfriend's in Jersey. I walked fast, keys in hand, head on a swivel, past the bodega, past the building with the scaffolding. One more block. I'd read somewhere that predators watch for people who look unsure. So I walked like I belonged, shoulders back, keys in hand. Don't look like a victim. Past the dry cleaner, the bodega, the stoop where the old guys sat in summer. The lobby door was broken. The super had been getting to it for months. Anyone could walk in. I'd complained. He'd said he'd look into it. He hadn't. I pushed it open and headed for the stairs. The lobby was dim. Same story with the lighting. Halfway up the first flight, lobby door creaked behind me. Another tenant, the super, had to be. I took the stairs faster. Second floor, third. The stairwell smelled like someone's dinner. Cabbage, garlic, footsteps, same pace, matching mine. I risked a glance. One flight down, looking up, navy jacket, dark jeans. He didn't run, didn't speak, just climbed. I ran, keys out always since this started, 2 at a time. Fumbled the lock, got inside, deadbolted, threw my weight against the door. 911. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. I could hear him on the other side. He'd stopped at my door. I didn't hear him try the knob. I didn't hear him knock. I just heard him breathing. I didn't know how long he stood there. 30 seconds. A minute. 5. Then footsteps. Going back down. Slow. Deliberate. Like he had all the time in the world. Like he'd be back. By the time the officers arrived, he was gone. I'd stayed against the door the whole time. Listened to his footsteps fade. Listened to the lobby door close. Was he really gone? Downstairs, outside, waiting in the building somewhere. I'd heard every step. I'd counted them. 5 flights of him walking away. I thought that would make me feel safer. It didn't. The 19th precinct is on 67th and Lexington. I'd walked past it 100 times. Never thought I'd be giving a statement there. They took a report, asked if I'd gotten a look at him. I had. I'd been memorizing his face for weeks. Could have drawn him from memory. Could have picked him out of a lineup. The shape of his jaw, the way he held his shoulders, the navy jacket, the dark jeans, the backpack. I knew everything about him, except his name, except why, except how to make him stop. They asked if I'd ever spoken to him. I said no. I'd never said a word. I'd been too scared. I thought if I ignored him, maybe he'd go away. He hadn't. One of them asked if I'd ever given him my address, my name, anything. I said no. I'd never spoken to him. He said sometimes people find that information online, social media, voter registration, old accounts. He said to be careful. He said to vary my routine. I wanted to scream that I had. I spent that night with every light on, my back against the door. staring at my phone. The apartment was small, 5th floor, one window facing the air shaft. I could hear the neighbors through the walls. Could they hear me? Would they come if I screamed? I called my roommate. She wasn't home. I texted my mom. She said to come stay with her in Connecticut. I said I'd think about it. I didn't sleep, sat with my back against the door until the sky turned gray. Watched the light change through the window. Listened for footsteps. Every form I'd ever filled out. Every delivery. Every account. The gym on 72nd. The dry cleaner. The pharmacy. Voter registration. How many places had my address? Data broker sites, I'd heard about them. Never looked, never had to. In the morning, I searched my name. First result, a site that listed my full address, my age, names of neighbors. I'd never heard of it. I'd never signed up. Someone had put me there. I paid the fee to remove it. The listing stayed up for weeks. I moved within the month, different neighborhood, different train line, a building with a working lobby door and a doorman. Didn't tell my old landlord where I was going. P.O. Box for the first few months. Deleted old social media. Changed my gym. Changed my dry cleaner. Changed the coffee shop where I stopped every morning. Every place that had known my routine, I had to let it go. The city felt smaller after that. Or maybe I just stopped trusting it. It took months before the data broker sites stopped showing my old address. My new place has a doorman who knows my face. The lobby door actually locks. I take the 4-5 now instead of the 6. Different platform, different faces. Some days I still catch myself scanning. Still check over my shoulder on the walk from the train. Still tell someone when I'm walking home late. The city feels different now. Sharper. I notice every navy jacket, every backpack. I wish I didn't. If you're being followed, document everything. Tell people. And if your gut says run, run. Don't wait for permission. Sometimes the danger doesn't follow you home. Sometimes it moves in next door. Next, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The danger lived one wall away. He didn't need to break in. He had the super. Converted factory building off Bedford Avenue, Williamsburg. Exposed brick. Pipes that knocked when the heat came on. L train rumbling underneath, that specific rumble when it passes under Bedford. The smell of roasting coffee from the cafe on the ground floor. Bagels in the morning. The vintage shop across the street with the rotating window display. I'd lived there 2 years. Knew the block. Knew the rhythms. The unit next to mine had been empty for months. No flushing above me, no footsteps. Peace. Then November. Someone moved in. I heard the movers. I heard the door. I didn't think much of it. His name was Theo. He introduced himself in the hallway friendly, a little intense, said he was a photographer. He asked what I did, where I was from, if I lived alone. I gave vague answers. I'd learned that lesson in the city. Don't overshare. Don't make yourself easy to find. He He said he'd just moved from Bushwick. Said he needed more space for his work. Said he was glad to have a neighbor. I said welcome to the building. I went inside. I didn't think about it again until the next week. Over the next few weeks, he kept finding reasons to talk. He'd be in the hallway when I left for work. He'd be taking out his trash when I came home. He remembered things, my favorite coffee place on Bedford Avenue, the day I usually did laundry, the brand of yogurt I bought. He said he'd noticed my schedule, said it was a habit, watching the building, making sure nothing seemed off. Brooklyn's full of eccentric neighbors. Maybe he was just lonely. I stopped using the laundry room when he was home, left for work at different times, didn't linger in the hallway. Then the first note slipped under my door, handwritten. It said he'd heard me crying the night before and wanted me to know he was there if I needed someone. I hadn't been crying. I'd been on the phone with my mom, laughing about something. I froze. How had he known I was on the phone? The walls were thin. I told myself he'd heard my voice and assumed. I tried to forget it. Couldn't. I went to my landlord. The management office was in the basement. I showed him the notes. He said Theo had apologized for the first one, said he'd been drinking, said he'd heard someone crying and wanted to help. I said I hadn't been crying. The landlord shrugged. Theo had paid 6 months up front, been nothing but polite. He suggested I talk to him myself. I did, knocked on his door. The hallway smelled like takeout. Said I appreciated the thought, but I preferred to keep to myself. He nodded. He said he understood. He said he'd been worried about me living alone, coming home late. Liked knowing I was safe. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Like he was doing me a favor. Like he was protecting me. Like he had a right to know. Like my safety was his business. I'd had neighbors before. Friendly ones. This was different. This felt like being watched. The hallway in that building was long, dark, single bulb at each end. The kind of place where you could stand at one end and watch someone's door without them knowing. The floor was old linoleum. You could hear footsteps. I'd learned to listen for them, to distinguish his from the supers. From the guy in 3B, his were heavier, slower, like he had nowhere else to be. I started noticing how often he was already there when I left, already there when I came home. I started noticing things. The way he'd appear in the hallway right when I left. The way he'd know which days I did laundry. The way he'd mention the brand of yogurt I bought. I hadn't told him. I'd never mentioned it. Had he been in the building when I came home with groceries? Had he been watching? 2 nights later, I woke to scratching, like something dragging along the wall we shared, coming from his side, deliberate, rhythmic. I pressed my hand to the wall, felt the vibration. Didn't sleep. Get up. Bang on the wall. Call the police. I lay there. It would stop. It didn't. The next morning, I found another note. This one said he knew I'd hurt him. He said he was sorry if he'd scared me. He said he was just trying to get my attention. Landlord again. Theo had apologized, moving furniture. I was overreacting. Break my lease. No. Call the police. My neighbor writes notes. Scratches the wall. No proof, just a feeling. A sound at 2 a.m. I bought a camera. Needed to see him. Needed something I could show someone. Installed it Friday. Didn't tell anyone, wanted to catch him. What he did next made it clear he'd been getting my attention for a long time, in ways I hadn't even noticed. The scratching went on for a week. Every night, same time, same rhythm. I started sleeping with my headphones on. I'd play white noise. I'd play podcasts. Nothing drowned it out completely. Through the wall, through my pillow. Our bedrooms shared a wall. He was scratching from his side, toward mine. First night with the camera, 2 a.m. He was at my door, standing, not knocking. 20 minutes. I watched the timestamp. He didn't move, sat in the living room with every light on. The wall was so thin. The second night he was there again. 2:17 a.m. Same spot, same posture. And the third, 2:04 a.m. Every night. Never earlier than 1:50, never later than 2:30. He had a pattern. He had a routine. He'd wake up. He'd walk to my door. He'd stand there. I started keeping a log. I started sleeping with the camera feed on my phone. I'd wake up at 2 and check. He'd be there every night. Same time. Same place. I didn't know what he was waiting for. I didn't want to find out. I went to the police with the footage. The 94th precinct on Messerole Avenue. Showed them the timestamps. The log. 7 nights of him standing at my door. Same time. Same place. They spoke to him. Sleepwalking, he said. Had a condition. Without a direct threat or forced entry, nothing they could do. What would count as a direct threat? He'd have to say something. Do something. Standing at my door every night at 2 a.m. wasn't something. They talked to him. They did. He kept doing it. I asked my landlord to let me out of my lease. He said no, not without a penalty. 2 months' rent. I didn't have it. I started sleeping at a friend's place in Astoria. I went back to my apartment only to shower and grab clothes. I'd go during the day when I knew Theo was at work. I'd check the camera feed first. I'd make sure the hallway was empty. I'd listen at the door before I opened it. I'd become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was always listening, always checking, always afraid. Bedford Avenue in the afternoon, the cafes, the vintage shops. I'd walk past and feel like I was going to a crime scene. My own apartment, my own life. Tuesday afternoon. I checked the camera feed. Hallway empty. Listened at the door before I opened it. I was grabbing clothes from the bedroom when I heard my lock turn. No knock, no buzz. I hadn't given anyone a key. I grabbed my phone and backed into the bathroom. Footsteps. Then his voice. He said he knew I was home. He said the super had let him in. He'd told him he was checking on a water leak that we shared a pipe. He said he just wanted to talk. I called 911. I stayed in that bathroom until the police arrived. I didn't make a sound. He stood in my living room for 15 minutes. I could hear him through the door, footsteps in my kitchen, in my bedroom. Moving, pausing, moving again, back against the bathroom door. Scissors in the drawer. Would anyone hear if I screamed? I deadbolted when I came in. The super had let him in, believed the story about a water leak. My door hadn't been enough. Then the sirens. I'd never been so relieved to hear sirens in my life. They arrested him for trespassing. The super was apologetic. He said Theo had seemed so convincing. He said he'd had a work order in his hand. He'd printed it himself, I later learned. I moved out the next week, ate the penalty, didn't care. Last I heard he'd been charged, and the building had changed their policy about letting tenants into each other's units. No more checking for leaks without the tenant present. I'd like to think I helped with that. I got a new apartment in Greenpoint. Nassau Avenue, brick building, thick walls. I can't hear my neighbors. The G train doesn't run as often as the L. Sometimes you wait 15 minutes on the platform. I'd stand there and listen for the rumble. The G runs to Brooklyn, to Queens. Doesn't touch Manhattan. Different world, different faces. I didn't mind the wait. I'd stand on the platform and listen for it. The sound of the train, the certainty that it would come. I got a new lock, a chain, a camera on the door. A lot of things. The feeling that I was safe in my own home, that took longer. Months. Maybe it never fully comes back. Some things you have to learn to trust again. I still startle when I hear footsteps in the hallway. Still check my peephole before I open my door. Still listen before I unlock. Some things don't go away. If your neighbor makes you uncomfortable, trust it. Document. Tell your landlord. And never assume that shared walls mean you're alone. In Queens, the danger wasn't in the hallway. It was in the ceiling. Astoria, Queens. The apartment above me was empty until it wasn't. N train to work, that rattle over the bridge into Manhattan, the view of the East River when the doors opened at Queensboro Plaza. The tracks squeal on the curves. You learn the sound. 30th Avenue, 6 stories, no elevator. The Greek diner on the corner with the spanakopita and the weak coffee. The hookah lounge with the colored lights. The fruit stand that stayed open late, watermelon in summer, apples in fall. I'd walked past them 1,000 times. Never thought about what was above. Top floor, the apartment above had been empty for a year. Super said the owner was waiting for the right tenant. No one flushing above me at midnight. No one moving furniture. I'd gotten a good deal. Signed a year lease. Hung my pictures. Made it mine. Astoria felt like a relief. Quieter than Manhattan. Cheaper. More space. Then March, footsteps. At first I thought it was the building. Old construction, pipes, wind. The building was from the 40s. It had character. It had sounds. I'd lived there for 8 months without thinking about it. One night, I couldn't sleep. Lay there listening. Left, right, pause. Left, right, pause. Someone pacing. Someone thinking. The super. Maybe he had a key to 6B. I didn't ask. Didn't want to be the tenant who complained. Didn't want to be the person who heard things. I'd had a neighbor in my last building who complained about noise. I thought she was paranoid. I thought she was overreacting. I wondered if I was wrong. Went to the super. No one had moved in. Maybe the pipes. Pipes don't pace. Pipes don't sound like shoes. I started sleeping with earplugs. The footsteps got louder. They'd start around midnight and go on for hours. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like furniture shifting. Once, in the middle of the night, I heard a woman's voice, muffled. I couldn't make out words. I knocked on my ceiling. Silence. Then the footsteps started again. One night, I woke to the sound of something being dragged across the floor above me. Heavy, deliberate. I lay there for an hour, too scared to move. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The bedroom was dark. The window was open, always open in summer. The N train rumbled in the distance. Someone was up there. Someone was moving something. I told myself for weeks it was the building. Old pipes, wind. I couldn't tell myself that anymore. Call the police. I'm hearing something dragged in the apartment above me. The one that's supposed to be empty. They'd think I was crazy. In the morning, I went up to the 6th floor. The door to 6B was locked. A layer of dust on the knob. I knocked. No answer. I tried the knob. It was locked. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard nothing. No footsteps. No movement. No sound at all. The apartment was supposed to be empty. The door was supposed to be locked. So why had I heard someone pacing? Why had I heard furniture? Why had I heard a voice? I tried the super again. He said he'd check. He never did. Stay, listen, try to sleep. I just signed a lease. 2 weeks later, I came home from work and my door was ajar. Not wide open, just slightly, like someone had tried it and left. Nothing inside was missing. Nothing was moved. But I knew. I installed a camera. I installed a chain. I started checking my closet before I went to sleep. The open door had to be a mistake. I knew it wasn't. I developed a ritual: lock, check, check again, every time I left. I'd called the super that morning. No one had been in. Someone had tried the door. Then I found it. I was changing a light bulb in my bedroom. I stood on my desk chair and noticed a dark spot in the corner near the window. I climbed down and got a flashlight. A small hole, the size of a pencil. When I stood on my bed and looked up, I could see light. Someone had drilled through from above. Someone had been looking down. Into my room, at me. I didn't scream, didn't cry, just stood there. How many nights had I undressed in that room? Slept with the window open. Assumed the ceiling was just a ceiling. The angle, he'd have had a clear view of my bed, my closet, everything. Phone calls. Moments I thought were private. None of them had been. I didn't wait for the police. I packed a bag and left that night. What they found in 6B, I still can't talk about it. I didn't wait. Grabbed my phone, my wallet, a change of clothes. Left everything else. Left the furniture. Left the books. Left the life I'd built in that apartment. I called a friend from the street. I was crying. Couldn't explain. Said I was leaving my apartment and I couldn't go back. She said, "Come over." I took an Uber. 30th Avenue at midnight, the Greeks were still out, the hookah lounge spilling noise onto the sidewalk. I didn't look back. I stayed with a friend in Sunnyside for a week. A different borough. A different train. The 7 runs above ground through Queens. You can see the sky. I'd stare out the window and feel my heart slow down. Didn't go back to that apartment. Didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the hole, the light, the angle of it, the way he'd had a clear view of everything. I'd lie in her guest room and stare at the ceiling. Look for dark spots, anything that didn't belong. Get up and check. Stand on a chair, run my hand over the corners. My friend asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I wasn't. The Q train to her place felt different, felt exposed. The police eventually got a warrant. I'd given them my key. I'd given them everything. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to see that apartment again. They found evidence someone had been living in 6B without the owner's knowledge, squatting. Food wrappers, a sleeping bag, a hot plate. The super had never checked. The owner had never come by. The empty apartment had been empty until it wasn't. And a collection of photographs of me through the hole, sleeping, undressing, living, dozens of them, different nights, different angles. The detective showed me a few. I couldn't look at most of them. He said they'd found other things too. Notes, a schedule, my work hours, my gym schedule, the address of my gym on 30th Avenue. He'd been tracking me. He'd known when I'd be home, when I'd be asleep. He'd known my routine better than I did. The detective asked if I'd noticed anything in the weeks before. I said I'd heard footsteps. I'd heard furniture. I'd heard a voice. I'd told myself it was pipes. I'd told myself I was imagining it. I'd told myself I was the kind of person who complained about nothing. He'd been living up there the whole time. He'd been watching. He'd been waiting. They never caught him. The case is still open. I still get a call from the detective every few months. Any new leads? No, nothing. I've learned to expect that. I've learned that sometimes the bad guys don't get caught. The hole in my ceiling, they filled it. The landlord had too. I never went back to see it. I never went back to that apartment at all. I moved to a different borough. I don't live on a top floor anymore. I couldn't. I looked at dozens of apartments. I turned down every one that had someone living above. I turned down every one where I couldn't inspect the ceiling. I check every ceiling now. Look at the corners. Every time I turn off the light, I change my clothes in the bathroom. Door locked. Light off in the bedroom. Paranoid. Maybe. It's what I need to feel safe. It's what I need to sleep. You never really get over knowing someone was watching. I've had nightmares. Woken up convinced I heard footsteps. Had to get up and check. Had to run my hand over the corners. My partner understands. Doesn't ask why. If something feels wrong in your building, report it. Get it in writing. And if you hear footsteps from an empty apartment above you, don't wait, leave. Not every threat hides in an empty apartment. Sometimes it's in the building, every day, someone everyone trusts. In the Bronx, the danger came from someone I saw every day. Next, the South Bronx. Workplace harassment doesn't always look the way you expect. Marcus was inside my classroom, at my desk. My bag was open in his hands. I'd come in early to set up Tuesday, 7:40. The building quiet, except for the hum of the vending machine down the hall. The week before it happened, I'd found a note on my desk. Handwritten. It said I had a nice smile. No signature. I showed it to a colleague. She said it was probably from one of the kids. I told myself she was right, but the handwriting looked adult. I threw it away. I didn't tell anyone else. Community Center on 149th Street, right by the 2-5. Winter light through the tall windows, the radiators knocking. The sound of kids in the hallway, basketball in the gym, laughter in the cafeteria. The smell of cafeteria food, mac and cheese day, pizza day. The mural of Marcus Garvey on the wall. That stretch of the Grand Concourse where the buildings get taller. After-school programs. 4 years. I loved it. The kids deserved better than what happened. The kids, the staff. The South Bronx felt like where I was meant to be. Marcus had been there for 2 maintenance. Fixed the boiler when it went out. Fixed the locks. Had keys to everything. Everyone liked him. He fixed things. He had keys. He had access. He had the trust of everyone in the building. The super liked him. The director liked him. The kids liked him. Everyone liked him. That was the problem. When someone everyone likes does something wrong, nobody wants to believe it. Nobody wants to be the one who saw it. Nobody wants to ruin his second chance. I'd been the one who saw it. I'd been the one who couldn't unsee it. I'd been the one who had to leave. He was quiet, kept to himself. I'd say hi in the hallway. That was it. Then he started showing up. In the break room when I was alone. In the parking lot when I left at night. He'd ask about my day, about my plans, about whether I had a boyfriend. I said I preferred to keep work and personal life separate. He smiled and said he understood. But he kept finding reasons to be near me. He'd volunteer to fix things in my classroom, the radiator, the blinds, the lock on the supply closet. He'd wait by my car to make sure I got to it safe. He'd find reasons to be in the hallway when I passed. I started taking different routes to the parking lot. I'd wait for other staff before leaving. I'd ask colleagues to walk me to my car. I brought it up to my supervisor. She said she'd talk to him. Not to make a big deal, he was just friendly. He'd had a rough life, meant well. The center had given him a second chance. I'd worked with difficult people before. People who didn't understand boundaries. Marcus was different. Marcus watched. Marcus remembered. Marcus found reasons to be wherever I was. I'd mentioned a coffee shop on 3rd Avenue once. He'd shown up there on his break. I'd said I liked a certain brand of granola. He'd left a box on my desk. I hadn't asked for it, threw it away. He'd asked about it the next day. Said he'd noticed I hadn't taken it home. I'd stopped mentioning things, stopped sharing anything. It didn't matter. He was always there. The big deal started a month after the note. That Tuesday, I came in early, building empty, security on a break. I walked to my classroom and pushed the door open. He looked up when I came in. He didn't seem surprised. He didn't jump. He didn't act like he'd been caught. He looked at me like he'd been waiting, like he'd known I'd come, like this was exactly where he was supposed to be. He said he was looking for a work order. I said, "Get out." He didn't move. He didn't put down my planner. He didn't close my bag. He just looked at me. He said he'd been thinking about me. He said he wanted to know me better. He said he'd noticed I didn't wear a ring. He said he'd been waiting for the right moment to tell me. I backed toward the door. I said I'd call security. He stood up. He was between me and the door, between me and the hallway. He was bigger than I'd realized. I'd always seen him from a distance. I'd always had other people around. I'd never been alone with him. Not like this. The classroom had one door, one window that looked out on the parking lot. Kids' artwork on the walls, the Black History Month mural we'd worked on together, the radiator clicking, the smell of crayons and construction paper. I'd never seen the way he looked when there was no one else to perform for. In the hallway, he was friendly. In the break room, he was helpful. In my classroom, alone, he was something else. Something I hadn't known was there. He said I didn't need to be scared. He said he'd never hurt me. He said he just needed me to understand how he felt. I was in the hallway before he finished the sentence. I ran. I didn't stop until I was in the parking lot with my keys in my hand. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. Couldn't stop shaking. His hands on my planner, on my bag. Photos in there. Receipts. Things that told him where I'd been. Things that told him about my life. The parking lot on 149th, other cars, other people. I'd never felt unsafe at work before. The center was supposed to be safe for the kids, for the staff. I reported it that day. HR was in the back of the building, windowless room, fluorescent lights, a chair that was too small. The woman across from me had a folder with my name on it. She took a statement. She nodded. She said they'd talked to him, that they took these things seriously. Her tone was careful, neutral. I believed her. I left feeling like I'd done the right thing. The hallway still smelled like floor wax. The kids had art class that afternoon. I taught it. I don't remember what we made. He was suspended pending an investigation. I went back to work. Kids had art class that afternoon. I taught it. I don't remember what we made. Just the feeling that I'd done the right thing, that someone would believe me. I avoided the maintenance office. I stopped eating in the break room. I brought my lunch to my classroom. I locked the door when I was alone. I was never alone, not really, not after that. A colleague walked me to my car every night. He was back 2 weeks later. Insufficient evidence, they said. He'd told them I'd invited him into my classroom, that I'd been giving him mixed signals, that I'd asked him to help me with something, and then changed my story when someone walked by. I couldn't believe it. I'd never invited him. I'd never given him any signal. I'd never asked him for help. I'd done everything I could to avoid him. I'd changed my routes. I'd stopped eating in the break room. I'd locked my door, and he'd turned it around. He'd made it sound like I'd wanted it, like I'd led him on, like I was the one who'd crossed a line. The HR person had looked at me when he said it. She'd looked at me like she was considering it, like she was wondering. I'd wanted to scream. I'd wanted to throw something. I'd wanted to make them understand. I didn't. I just sat there. I just took it. I asked for the security footage. They said the cameras in that hallway hadn't been working for months. I asked when they'd stopped working. They wouldn't say. I asked who had access to the camera system. They said maintenance. Marcus was maintenance. I asked if he could have disabled them. They said they'd look into it. They never did. I asked for a copy of the maintenance logs. They said that was confidential. I had nothing. I had nothing except my word, and his, and they'd believed him. I asked if Marcus had access to the maintenance area. They said they'd look into it. They never did. I asked for a copy of my report. They said it was confidential. I quit. I couldn't stay. Couldn't walk past him in the hallway. Couldn't sit in another meeting where they asked me to consider his perspective. Couldn't walk into that building again. Couldn't walk to my car and wonder if he was watching. Reporting it was supposed to make it stop. Someone was supposed to believe me. The system was supposed to work. It didn't. The kids deserved better. The center deserved better. I deserved better. I left anyway. The kids asked where I was going. I said I'd gotten a new job. I didn't tell them the truth. I didn't want them to worry. I didn't want them to stop feeling safe at the center. I'd loved that job. I'd loved those kids. One of them drew me a picture on my last day, a heart with their names inside. I still have it. I couldn't explain why I had to leave. I couldn't tell them that the person who fixed the boiler had made it, so I couldn't stay. I'd loved the feeling that I was doing something that mattered. Marcus had taken that from me. He'd taken my sense of safety. He'd taken my workplace. He'd taken my ability to walk into a room without scanning it first. Workplace harassment doesn't always look like yelling or threats. Sometimes it's the guy who just wants to understand. The guy everyone likes. The guy who had a rough life. Document everything. Report in writing. Get copies. And if they don't believe you, leave. Your safety is worth more than the job. I found another position at a different organization. I never put in a reference from the community center. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to sit in another interview and defend myself. I didn't want to see that look. Maybe you're exaggerating. Maybe you're difficult. Maybe you're the problem. I'd seen it enough. The only option that let me breathe was leaving. So I left. Last I heard, Marcus is still there. Still fixing things. Still trusted. The cameras in that hallway still not working. Last, I asked someone who stayed. If you're still with us, drop a comment with which story hit hardest so far. Your words help others find this. Let's keep going. Not every danger is a stranger. Sometimes it's the person who shares your lease. Next, Harlem, where home stopped feeling like home. I'd had a friend who'd left an abusive relationship. She'd had bruises. She'd had excuses. I'd never thought that would be me. I never had bruises. I never had a single moment I could point to, just a lot of small ones. A lot of it's not that bad. I'd moved there with Rashad after 5 years together. 1 bedroom on 125th, near the Apollo 4th floor, fire escape view of the street. Harlem. The sound of the 2-3 from the window, that rumble when the train came into the station. The smell of soul, food from the restaurants down the block. Fried chicken, collard greens, sweet potato pie. He worked from home, IT for a nonprofit. I taught 3rd grade at a charter school 6 blocks away. Red Rooster for brunch on Sundays. Marcus Garvey Park on weekends, the chess tables, the kids on the playground. We talked about getting a dog, walking it in the park, normal things, future things. We talked about marriage, kids, rings. It felt like we'd made it. Then the questions started. Small at first. Where had I been? Who was I talking to? Why was I late? I'd had a long meeting. I'd stopped for coffee. I'd run into an old friend. He'd want details. How long was the meeting? Who was there? Was it a male friend? Once I mentioned my colleague Ben. We'd had to stay late to finish report cards. Rashad showed up at the school the next day. Said he was in the neighborhood. Asked which room was Ben's. I'd answer every question after that. I think I was being a good partner. I think transparency was healthy. The questions got longer. He said he was just curious. He said he cared. I started answering anyway, thinking that would help. That transparency would build trust. It didn't. It didn't. The questions got longer, more specific. He'd ask about male colleagues by name. He'd want to know exactly what I'd said in meetings. Who had I sat next to? Had anyone flirted with me? I stopped mentioning people. Stopped staying late. Kept the peace. I was shrinking. A friend from work asked why I'd been distant. I made excuses, tired of explaining, tired of not being able to explain, because nothing had happened, not really. No yelling, no hitting, just a slow tightening. The kind that doesn't leave marks. The kind that makes you doubt yourself. The kind that makes you think maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe you're imagining it. I wasn't imagining it. He started checking my phone. Not obviously, he'd borrow it to look something up, then hand it back. I'd find it in a different place. I'd find apps I hadn't opened. I asked him to stop. He said I was being paranoid. He said if I had nothing to hide, why did I care? The last straw was my keys. I came home from work, and they weren't where I'd left them. I searched for an hour. He watched from the couch. Didn't help. Didn't suggest places to look. Just watched. Eventually, I found them in his jacket pocket. He'd been wearing that jacket when I came in. He'd known the whole time. He'd watched me tear apart the apartment. He'd watched me get more and more frantic. He'd enjoyed it. He said he'd borrowed them to make a copy. He said he wanted a spare in case I ever lost mine. I didn't trust that. I didn't trust anything anymore. I'd spent an hour looking for my keys. I'd turned the apartment upside down. He'd watched from the couch. He'd known where they were the whole time. He'd wanted to see me search. He'd wanted to see me panic. I'd started sleeping with my phone under my pillow. I'd started waiting for him to fall asleep before I could close my eyes. I'd started hiding cash in a book. I'd started thinking about exit routes. I didn't call it abuse. I didn't call it anything. I called it going through a rough patch. I called it stress. I called it anything other than what it was. The apartment on 125th, we'd picked it together. The view of the street. The sound of the 2-3 at night. I'd loved it once. I called a hotline from a bathroom stall at work. I whispered, afraid he'd hear. Afraid he'd check my phone. Afraid of everything. The charter school on 125th, the bathroom had a lock. I'd never needed it for something like this. The woman on the other end listened. She didn't tell me to leave. She didn't tell me to stay. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't tell me to give him another chance. She just listened. And when I was done, she said the words I'd been needing to hear. She said it wasn't my fault. She said I deserved to feel safe. She said wanting to leave was enough. I'd needed to hear that. I'd needed someone to say it. I hadn't been able to say it to myself. She said it was my choice. She said I deserved to feel safe in my own home. I hadn't felt safe in months. She said what I was describing sounded like coercive control. She said I didn't need to wait for it to get worse. She said I didn't need a reason to leave. She said wanting to leave was enough. She gave me a number for a safe house. She said I could call any time. I wrote it down. I hid it in my wallet. I didn't think I'd use it. I was wrong. The keys were the last straw. Before that, I'd been able to explain it away. He was anxious. He cared. He was going through something. The keys were different. The keys meant he'd made a copy. The keys meant he could get in whenever he wanted. keys meant I was never really alone, even when he wasn't there, even when the apartment was empty. He had a way in. I couldn't live with that. I packed a bag the next day while he was at the gym. Blink Fitness on 125th. He went every morning at 7. Same routine for 2 years. I had maybe an hour. I'd been planning it in my head for weeks without letting myself call it a plan. I took my documents, some clothes, the cash I'd hidden in the book, left the rest, left the furniture we'd bought together, left the pictures on the wall. I left a note. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I'd looked back, I might have stayed. I might have talked myself into giving him another chance. The woman on the hotline had said wanting to leave was enough. I'd held on to that. Took the A train to Penn Station. Bus to Jersey. Stayed with a friend for 2 weeks. He called 37 times. I blocked him. Coercive control doesn't always leave bruises. It leaves you smaller. Document. Tell someone. And when just curious starts feeling like a cage, get out. I got a new apartment. I changed my number. I didn't give him my new address. He still tried to find me. Mutual friends. Old accounts. He'd created a new Instagram to message me. He'd texted from unknown numbers. He'd shown up at my school once. I'd had to have security walk me to my car for a month. I had to block a lot of people. People I'd thought were friends. People who'd said they understood. People who'd said they'd talk to him, and then told him where I was. It was worth it. Every blocked number, every lost friend, every moment of starting over. I got a new apartment in Washington Heights. Different neighborhood, different train. The A runs express, Fort Tryon Park, the Cloisters. I'd walk there on weekends and feel the space, the trees, the quiet. It was worth it to feel like I could breathe again. To feel like the walls weren't closing in. To feel like I had a choice. On the Lower East Side, the danger was hiding in plain sight. Lower East Side. The door was locked. He was inside anyway. Ludlow Street bar with sticky floors and a neon sign that flickered. The F train rumbling under the street. The smell of late-night pizza and garbage on hot nights. I'd been tending for 2 years. Knew the regulars. Knew which corners to avoid walking home at 3 a.m., the alley near Rivington, the block where the bodega had closed. Knew drunk from dangerous. Or thought I did. David was a regular. He came in maybe twice a week, always alone, always polite. He tipped well. He never bothered anyone. He'd sit at the end of the bar and watch the room. Shy. Maybe. Lonely. The LES had a lot of people like that, solitary regulars who came for the noise and the light. The bar was on Ludlow between Rivington and Stanton. We had a jukebox. We had sticky floors. We had the kind of regulars who'd nurse a beer for 2 hours and leave at 20. David was one of those, until he wasn't. Katz's was down the street. The crowds spilled out, but our bar was smaller, quieter, the kind of place where you could sit for hours and nobody would notice. Or everybody would, depending on who was watching. I'd make small talk when I had a moment. He'd ask about my shift, about the neighborhood, about whether I liked working nights. I gave short answers. Bar talk. He'd linger sometimes after he'd finished his drink. I'd tell him we were closing. He'd nod and leave, but he'd always look back. I'd started noticing the way he'd watch the door when I went to the back, the way he'd note when I was alone, the way he'd stay later when it was quiet. Once he asked what my real name was. I'd given him a fake one when he'd asked before. Work and personal life separate. He smiled. Understood. Bartenders get that. People get attached to the person who pours their drinks. One night I closed up alone. My manager had left early. The kitchen was closed. The last customer had left half an hour before. I'd locked the door. I'd flipped the sign. I'd turned off the music. The bar was quiet. The street outside was quiet. The LES after 2 a.m. was a different place. Fewer people, more shadows. I was counting the register when I heard the door. I'd locked it. I'd flipped the sign. David was standing there. He was inside. I hadn't unlocked it. I hadn't heard the lock turn. He was just there, standing in my bar, looking at me. He said he'd forgotten his wallet. I said we were closed. He said he'd just need a minute. He was inside before I could say no. The door had been locked. I'd checked it. I'd locked it myself when the last customer left. I hadn't unlocked it for him. I hadn't even moved toward it. He was inside. He must have been waiting. He must have slipped in when I'd taken the trash out. When I'd turned my back. When I thought I was alone. He'd been somewhere, watching, waiting for his moment. He must have been watching. I'd walked past the windows when I was closing. I'd seen the street. I hadn't seen him. He'd been somewhere, in the alley, in a doorway. Somewhere close. Somewhere where he could see when the last customer left. When the lights dimmed. When I was alone. I kept the bar between us. I said I'd get his wallet from the lost and found. He said he hadn't left it. He said he just wanted to talk. Alone. I reached for my phone. He moved fast. He was around the bar before I could dial. The bar was between us 1 second. Then it wasn't. He didn't touch me. He just stood there close and said he'd been watching me for months. He said he knew my schedule. He said he knew I walked home alone. He said he'd been thinking about what that must feel like walking through the empty streets at 3 a.m. He said he'd thought about offering to walk me home. He said he wanted me to know he was there. I backed toward the kitchen. I said I'd call the police. He smiled. He said he'd go. Didn't want to scare me. He'd see me tomorrow. Promise or threat, I couldn't tell. He left. Walked out like we'd had a normal conversation. Like he hadn't just moved around the bar without an invitation. Like he hadn't just told me he'd been watching me for months. The door closed behind him. I stood there. Register still open. Lights still on. The F train rumbled under the floor. I'd never felt so far from the crowds on Ludlow. I didn't call the police that night. He hadn't touched me. hadn't threatened me, not in words. I told myself I was overreacting. I was wrong. The way he'd moved, how fast he'd gotten around the bar. See you tomorrow, promise or threat. I locked the door, finished the count, walked home through the busy streets, Houston, then Essex, stayed where there were people. Looked over my shoulder the whole way. 20 blocks. Everyone felt like a mile. I didn't sleep. Lay in bed with every light on. The next night, he wasn't there. Or the next. I started to relax. A week later, a woman from a bar on Orchard Street reported a man matching his description. He'd followed her home. He'd known her name, where she lived. The police connected him to 3 other incidents: bartenders, service workers, women who'd been alone when they closed. I gave a statement at the precinct on Ludlow. I wish I'd called that first night. He didn't touch me isn't the same as I was safe. If someone makes you uncomfortable, trust it. Your discomfort is enough. I left that bar. I work in the village now. West 4th. 2 people close every night. I made it non-negotiable. I tell every new bartender I train, never close alone. Never give anyone your real information. Never assume it won't happen to you. Sometimes the danger isn't in the city at all. It rings the bell. On Staten Island, the danger showed up at the door. Staten Island, Tottenville, Amby Road, the kind of neighborhood where people wave and kids play in the street. The Staten Island Railway a few blocks away, that horn when the train crosses the intersection. The quiet, no car alarms, no sirens at 2 a.m. I'd left Brooklyn for this, for the trees, for the yard, for the feeling that I could finally breathe. I hadn't expected to stop breathing in my own house. I'd bought the house after 15 years in Brooklyn. Needed trees, a yard, walls that didn't conduct every neighbor's argument. My ex had moved out 6 months earlier. I had the place to myself. I'd gotten used to the quiet, to the space, to not having to check who was in the hallway, to the back door that led to the yard, to the front door that faced the street. I'd never thought about them as entrances, just doors. The house had a driveway, a chain link fence, the kind of setup where you could see who was at the front door from the living room window. One Saturday in November, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the peephole. A man I didn't recognize. Clipboard, one question, and it wasn't about energy. He was holding a clipboard. He looked normal. He looked like someone who could be from an energy company. He could have been a salesman, a surveyor, a neighbor. He said he was from an energy company doing a neighborhood survey. I said I wasn't interested. He said it would only take a minute. He asked if I lived alone. The question stuck. Why would an energy survey need to know that? Energy usage, square footage, maybe. But the way he'd asked, like it mattered, like he was making a list. I didn't answer. I wouldn't have answered if he'd asked about the weather. I didn't answer. I closed the door. I watched through the window as he stood there for a moment, then walked to the next house. He hadn't waited for me to open the door. He hadn't pushed. He just stood there, clipboard in hand, asking about energy, asking if I lived alone, paranoid. Tottenville wasn't the city. People knocked on doors. Kids sold lemonade in summer. An hour later, he was back. Same clipboard. He rang the bell again. I didn't answer. I wouldn't have answered if he'd knocked all night. I watched through the window. He stood there for 5 minutes, not knocking again, not walking away, just standing, staring at the door, like he was waiting for something, like he was deciding something, like he was memorizing the layout of my house, the position of the windows, the path to the backyard. Then he left. He walked down the driveway. He didn't look back. I'd never been so scared of someone walking away. I called the non-emergency line. Said a man had come to my door twice. Said he'd asked if I lived alone. Said I was scared. The dispatcher was polite. She took the information. She said they'd send a car. I waited, watched through the window, made another cup of tea, couldn't drink it, watched the street. The Staten Island Railway runs until midnight. I could hear it in the distance, the normal sounds of the neighborhood. I'd never felt so disconnected from them. Watched for headlights through the living room window. The street stayed dark. No one came. Tottenville doesn't have the same response time as the city. Fewer patrols, fewer priorities. I waited. I thought about calling 911. I thought about what I'd say. He asked if I lived alone. He came back. I didn't have proof of anything illegal. I didn't call. I stayed by the window, watched the street, waited for morning. What would they do if I called again? No forced entry, no threats. I'd sound like I was paranoid. I'd sound like a woman who was scared of nothing. I wasn't scared of nothing. I was scared of him. The street stayed dark. No headlights. No patrol car. Tottenville at 2 a.m., everyone's lights were off. I was the only one still awake, the only one still watching. That night, I heard something at the back door. The handle, someone trying it. I'd been in the kitchen, making tea. The sound of the handle turning. The quiet click, someone testing it. Someone seeing if it would give. The backyard was dark, no motion lights. The porch was 3 steps from the door. I grabbed my phone, turned on every light, didn't sleep, sat in the living room with all the lights on, watching the back door, waiting for it to turn again, waiting for morning. I thought about calling the police again. I thought about what they'd say. No forced entry, no threats. I'd sound like I was paranoid. I thought about the man with the clipboard. I thought about the way he'd asked if I lived alone. I thought about the way he'd stood at my door for 5 minutes the second time, staring, not knocking again, just standing. He'd been casing the house. He'd been deciding something. He'd been making a plan. I'd interrupted it. Maybe. Or maybe he'd just been waiting for dark, for the right moment, for me to fall asleep. In the morning, I found footprints in the backyard, leading to the porch, leading away. The dew had settled, the grass was wet. The footprints were clear, men's shoes, size 10 or 11. I'd stood there with my coffee and stared at them. My hand was shaking. The cup rattled against the saucer. I'd thought about calling the police again. I'd thought about what they'd say. No forced entry. No threats. Just footprints. Just a man who'd asked if I lived alone. Just a man who'd come back. Just a man who'd stood at my door for 5 minutes, staring. I took photos. I installed cameras. I changed the locks. I told my neighbors. I asked if any of them had seen the man with the clipboard. One of them said he'd been through the week before, asking about who lived alone, asking about schedules, making notes. He'd been to every house on the block. He'd been taking inventory. They never caught him. The footprints didn't match anyone in the neighborhood. The cameras caught a figure in dark clothing the next night, but too far away to identify. I thought about getting a dog. I thought about moving. I'd just refinanced. I couldn't afford to leave. I stayed. Motion lights in the backyard. I installed them the week after. Cameras on every entrance. Locks changed. I still jump when the doorbell rings. I still check the locks 3 times before bed. The detective said to give myself permission to feel scared. I'm still working on that. The yard feels different now, brighter. Less like a place someone could hide. A neighbor down the street got a dog. I've thought about it. Something that barks. Something that would wake me up. If someone shows up uninvited and asks personal questions, don't answer. Trust your gut. And if they come back, call the police. Every time will end there. If any of this sounded familiar, you're not alone, and it's never too late to reach out. That's it for this series. 7 stories from 7 corners of New York, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Harlem, the Lower East Side, Staten Island. Every neighborhood has its own rhythm, its own dangers, its own stories. The 6 train and the L and the N and the 2-5. The bodegas and the diners. The buildings with doormen and the ones with broken lobby doors. The city is full of people who have learned the hard way. We don't always talk about it. We don't always have the words. But we're here. We survived. We learned. We've covered subway stalkers and data brokers, how easy it is to find someone's address online. Neighbors who cross every line. Empty apartments that aren't empty. Workplace harassment that gets dismissed. Relationships that tighten until you can't breathe. Bartenders who learn the hard way. Door-to-door surveys that ask the wrong questions. Every borough, every kind of threat, every kind of survivor. The city is full of these stories. Most of them never get told. Most of them never get believed. Until it's too late. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. It means something when people take the time to hear these stories. It means something when we don't have to tell them alone. If these stories resonated, if you've ever had that gut feeling and ignored it, you're not alone. There are more of us than you think. If something feels wrong, run. Document everything. Tell people. Your safety matters more than being polite. If these stories stayed with you, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Where you're from, which story you couldn't forget. We read every one. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you in the next one.